Ever feel like just getting started with a financial plan is like harder than actually doing it?
Uh-huh. I hear that.
We're going to try to make it less intimidating today.
Yeah.
We're diving into a popular podcast about financial planning and pulling out all the good stuff.
Exact.
No more feeling lost in a sea of jargon.
Right. To the point?
We'll uncover those key steps to build a solid financial future for yourself.
Sounds like a plan.
So what really stuck with me from this podcast was the idea that you got to start with your why.
Yeah, it's like,
Before even thinking numbers.
it's less about crunching numbers and more about figuring out what those numbers mean for you.
Right. What are we actually working towards? A house, early retirement, maybe that dream vacation.
Exactly. Once you have that clear vision, the financial planning feels less like a chore and more like a roadmap to get you there.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm ready to trade my spreadsheets for a map and a compass.
Uh-huh. I like it.
But before we get too caught up in the excitement of our destination, there's that one crucial step the podcast talked about.
The dreaded B word, budgeting.
Close. But this one comes even before that.
Oh, you mean facing our current financial situation?
Exactly. It's time for a financial reality check.
Yeah, it's like going to the doctor for a checkup. You need the full picture, even if it means hearing something you don't necessarily want to.
No sugarcoating here. We're diving deep. So that means we got to look at our income, expenses, savings, and yes, even any debts we have.
It's all part of the process. The more transparent we are with ourselves, the more effective our plan will be.
And once we have that clear snapshot, then we can really dive into budgeting. But before you think this is all about cutting out lattes and fun.
Right. Nobody wants to live a life of deprivation.
Exactly. This podcast had a really refreshing take on budgeting.
It's more about intentionality and flexibility. They talked about the 50-30-20 rule as a good starting point. 50% of your income for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings and debt repayment.
I like how they break it down like that. It makes it seem much more manageable. But let's get real for a second. What are some of those wants that bring you joy within that 30%? Is it travel? Trying new restaurants? Maybe it's collecting vintage comic books?
For me, it's definitely travel. Those experiences and memories are priceless, but it's all about figuring out what truly matters to you and allocating your resources accordingly.
It's about funding your own definition of a fulfilling life.
And
And speaking of funding, let's talk about a crucial part of any good financial plan. Something the podcast called our financial superhero cape.
oh, you mean the emergency fund?
You got it. Because even superheroes need a backup plan.
Right.
But seriously, why is this emergency fund so important? The podcast emphasized having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved up.
Exactly. It acts as a buffer against life's unexpected events. Job loss, medical expenses, car troubles. Having that cushion can make a huge difference.
It's like that safety net that allows you to navigate those curveballs without derailing your entire financial plan.
Exactly. It provides peace of mind knowing you have a financial buffer to fall back on.
Now, let's talk about something many people find intimidating: investing. It can feel like you need a Wall Street salary just to get started.
That's a common misconception. You don't need to be a financial expert to start investing. The podcast talked about 401ks and IRAs, which are retirement savings accounts offered by many employers.
And they even touched upon the stock market, which can seem daunting for beginners.
Right. But the key takeaway is to start small and start early, even if it's just a few dollars here and there. Over time, those small contributions can grow significantly thanks to the power of compound interest.
They actually mentioned some investment apps that let you get started with just a few bucks, making investing accessible to practically everyone.
Exactly. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or need a little guidance, there are platforms like Fiverr where you can find freelance financial advisors who can help you create a personalized plan.
So there's really no excuse for not getting started.
Exactly. It's all about taking that first step.
And just like we don't wait till our car breaks down to get it checked, the podcast also talked about giving our financial plans regular checkups.
Right, like an annual tune-up.
Makes sense. Our finances aren't static, so our plans shouldn't be either.
Exactly. Life throws curveballs, new job, growing family. Maybe you finally decide to get that dog you've always wanted.
All of that impacts our finances.
Exactly. Your financial plan needs to be flexible enough to roll with those punches.
Speaking of curveballs, the podcast talked about different ways to tackle debt, like those snowball and avalanche methods. What are those all about?
Sure. So imagine you have a bunch of different debts, maybe credit card debt, student loans, even a personal loan. With the snowball method, you focus on paying off the smallest debt first, no matter the interest rate.
So it's less about the big picture and more about those quick wins for motivation.
Right. It gives you a sense of momentum. Like, okay, one down, a few more to go. Then you take that money you're putting towards the small debt and roll it into the next smallest debt.
So it snowballs as you go.
Exactly. Now, the avalanche method is a bit different. You prioritize the debts with the highest interest rates first, regardless of how big or small the debt is.
So even if you have a small debt with a sky-high interest rate, you tackle that before a larger debt with a lower interest rate.
Exactly. It's all about saving you money in the long run by minimizing the amount of interest you accrue. But at the end of the day, the best approach really depends on your personality and your individual financial situation.
So some people might find that quick win with a snowball method keeps them more motivated, while others prefer the strategic approach of the avalanche method.
Exactly. And the podcast made a good point that simply acknowledging your debt and having a plan to pay it down can significantly reduce financial stress.
It's about taking control instead of letting it loom over you.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of taking control, let's shift gears to mindful spending.
Ooh, that's something I've been trying to be more mindful of. It's so easy to let those little expenses add up without realizing it.
Right. And the podcast actually called this the latte factor.
Latte factor.
Those small everyday expenses, that daily lattes, eating out for lunch, buying things you don't really need.
Oh yeah, those can sneak up on you.
They sure can. Over time, those small expenses can derail even the most carefully crafted budget.
It's like that saying, watch your pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves.
Eh,
But I think it's more about finding a balance.
I agree.
It's not about depriving ourselves entirely. It's about enjoying those small pleasures, but also making sure they're not derailing our bigger financial goals.
I completely agree. And that's where mindful spending comes in. It's about being more intentional with our money, asking ourselves, do I really need this? Or do I just want it in this moment?
Yeah, being present with our spending instead of swiping our cards on autopilot.
Exactly. And sometimes that means saying no to a purchase, even if we really want it in that moment.
It's like building that financial discipline muscle.
Exactly. And the more we flex that muscle, the easier it becomes to make those intentional choices.
So mindful spending, check. Now let's talk about spreading our investments around something the podcast called diversification.
Right. Diversification is like a golden rule of investing. It's all about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Instead, you spread your money across different asset classes like stocks, bonds, and real estate.
So if one investment takes a hit, the others can help cushion the blow.
Precisely. It helps mitigate risk and potentially smooth out your returns over time.
But diversifying your investments sounds kind of complicated, doesn't it? Like something you'd need a financial advisor for.
It can seem that way, but it doesn't have to be. There are tons of resources available to help you learn about different investment options and how to create a diversified portfolio that aligns with your risk tolerance and financial goals.
And speaking of checkups, we should probably be doing that with our whole financial plan too, not just individual
Hey,
investment.
Bob, absolutely. Like, you got to make sure your financial house is still standing strong.
Exactly. Life changes, and our finances need to be able to adapt.
Exactly. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You got to adjust as you go.
Right. Speaking of adjusting, the podcast also mentioned something about making sure we're covered for those unexpected events in life.
Ah, yes. Insurance. That's a big one.
Yeah, like health insurance, life insurance, disability. It can feel kind of, well, a little overwhelming to think about.
It can, but it's one of those things that's better to have and not need than need and not have.
I guess that's true. It's about having that safety net just in case.
Exactly. It's about protecting yourself and your loved ones from those what-ifs in life.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. The podcast also talked about something that really resonated with me, aligning our money with our values.
Ah, values-based spending and investing. That's a topic I'm passionate about.
Me too. It's about being mindful of where our money's going and making sure it aligns with what we believe in.
Absolutely. Whether it's supporting local businesses, investing in sustainable companies, or donating to causes we care about.
Yeah, it's like our money could actually make a difference beyond just buying things.
Exactly. It's about using our financial power to shape the world we want to see.
I love that idea. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from setting financial goals and creating a budget to building an emergency fund, investing, and even aligning our money with our values.
It's been quite the deep dive.
It has. But I have to say I'm feeling pretty energized and ready to take action.
That's what it's all about. Remember, even small steps can lead to big changes over time.
So true. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of financial planning. We hope you've walked away feeling empowered and ready to take control of your financial future.
Absolutely. And remember, financial well-being is a journey, not a destination. So be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.